Hey there, curious minds. Welcome to another episode of I Wonder, the show where we explore the questions you've been wondering about. Today's question comes from Max, who lives in Costa Mesa, California. Max asked, how and when were automobiles invented? What a great question, Max. Cars are a huge part of our lives today. But there was a time when getting around involved, well, a lot of walking, or a bumpy ride on a horse-drawn carriage. Let's hop into our time machine and take a road trip through history to uncover how and when automobiles came to be.
Wow.
Before we had automobiles, most people relied on walking, riding horses, or being pulled in carriages. So when inventors started creating self-propelled vehicles in the 1800s, their designs were inspired by what they already knew: horse-drawn carriages. That's why early cars looked like carriages without the horse, complete with large wheels and a boxy frame. These designs were practical for the time, but they also showed how hard it was to imagine a world without horses. The first true automobile is credited to Carl Benz, who built his Benz patent motor wagon in 1886. Powered by a small gas engine, this three-wheeled vehicle had a top speed of about 10 miles per hour. It wasn't built for speed or comfort, but it was groundbreaking because it could move without a horse or a track, paving the way for modern transportation.
Bravo! Bravo!
As useful as horses were, they came with challenges. Horses needed food, rest, and a lot of care, not to mention the cleanup involved. Inventors wanted a faster, more efficient way to travel, especially for longer distances. While early automobiles weren't perfect, they were noisy, expensive, smelt like gas, they did represent a big leap forward. At first, cars were luxury items for the wealthy. But that all changed thanks to Henry Ford in the early 1900s. Ford's revolutionary Model T, introduced in 1908, became the first car many people could afford. How did he do it? By inventing the assembly line, a method of production where workers specialized in specific tasks, speeding up the manufacturing and lowering costs. Ford's innovation made cars more accessible, and suddenly, owning a car wasn't just for the super rich. It was for everyone.
Woohoo!
If you think modern cars have quirks, wait until you hear about the very first ones. Early cars were loud, bumpy, and about as comfortable as a wooden bench, because that's often what their seats were. Forget heated seats or cup holders. Driving one of these vehicles felt more like riding a shaky roller coaster. Safety wasn't exactly a top priority either. Seatbelts didn't exist yet. Windshields were optional. And brakes, well, let's just say stopping was more of a suggestion than a guarantee. To top it off, they broke down a lot. Imagine driving along and having to hop out every few miles to restart the engine or tighten a loose part. Still, people were fascinated by the freedom cars offered. So even with all their flaws, they represented a new way to think about travel. Why is it called horsepower? Here's a fun fact. The term horsepower came from an engineer named James Watt in the late 1700s. Watt was working on steam engines and wanted a way to compare their power to something people already understood: horses. He calculated that 1 horsepower was the amount of energy needed to lift 550 pounds on 1 foot in 1 second. In simpler terms, 1 horsepower equals to the strength of 1 hard-working horse. Even though cars replaced horses, the term stuck. So when someone brags about their car having 400 horsepower, you could imagine a herd of 400 horses working together. It's a funny mental picture, but it also shows how much power modern cars really have. How did cars change the world? Once cars became affordable and reliable, they transformed life as people knew it. Suddenly, you didn't have to live near your job or rely on a train schedule. You could go wherever there was a road. Towns and cities expanded, gas stations popped up everywhere, and road trips became a thing. But cars also brought challenges, like traffic jams, pollution, and the need for better safety measures. Over time, these problems inspired new innovations, from better engines to electric cars, which are helping to reduce pollution today. Fun facts about automobiles. Here's a fun one. The first speeding ticket was issued in 1902. And guess how fast the driver was going? A wild 45 miles per hour. Back then, that was considered dangerously fast, practically light speed. Another fun fact, the earliest gas stations were called filling stations and were just general stores with a pump outside. There were no convenience stores, car washes, or snack aisles yet. And did you know that early cars were often started with a crank? You had to manually turn a handle at the front of the car to start the engine. And if the handle snapped back, it could whack you in the face. Oof, ouch. So Max, how and when were automobiles invented? The first car was built in 1886 by Carl Benz, but the idea of a horseless carriage had been around for a while. Early cars were slow and noisy and looked like something a horse should be pulling. Thanks to innovators like Henry Ford, cars became affordable and changed the way people lived forever. And while we might not rely on horses anymore, we still measure power in horsepower, keeping a little bit of history alive every time you hit the gas pedal. Thanks again to Max for such a horsepower-packed question. And remember, if you have a question you're curious about, submit it on our website, iwonderpodcast.com, and we might just feature it in our next episode of I Wonder. Until next time, stay curious and keep wondering.